There is a strange kind of exhaustion that only certain people understand. It settles in the body quietly, the way dust settles on a forgotten instrument. You go through your day doing what everyone else seems to do, yet something inside you grows heavier with each passing hour. Nothing dramatic happens, nothing obvious goes wrong. Still, a weight gathers in the places no one can see. For an empath, this weight comes from noticing what others overlook. A room might look calm, yet beneath the stillness you sense the tightness in someone's breath. A smile might appear flawless, yet you feel the strain woven through it. You walk through life sensing the soft hum beneath the polished surfaces that everyone else praises. They call it composure. You feel the pressure inside it. This creates a curious paradox. The world celebrates perfection, the clean edge, the seamless performance. Empaths feel the life underneath those polished edges. They feel the cracks that have been smoothed over. They feel the tremor hidden inside the performance, and because of this, they tire more quickly than most. Imagine standing in a gallery where every sculpture has been shaped to appear flawless. The lighting is bright, the surfaces shine, people admire the symmetry and the smoothness. Yet the empath notices something else entirely. They sense the discarded fragments. They sense the chisel marks that were never meant to show. They sense the effort required to keep the illusion intact. This is the beginning of their exhaustion, not because they are fragile, but because they are awake in a world that prefers to sleep behind its own perfection. They feel the humanity that others hide, and the cost of that hiding becomes something they carry. The exhaustion of an empath does not come from sensitivity alone. It comes from living in a world shaped like a vast sculptor's workshop, where every person is quietly carving themselves into an acceptable shape. In this workshop, nothing is valued more than smooth edges and polished surfaces. People sand down their flaws, hide their doubts, sculpt their personalities into something presentable, and then hold that posture for as long as they can. Perfection becomes the currency of belonging. Most people adapt to this workshop easily. They learn to keep their roughness out of sight. They speak in well-formed lines. They move through life with practiced certainty. They convince themselves that the shape they have chosen or have been pressured into choosing is the only way to exist in this world. They do not see the debris that falls each time they carve away something true. They do not notice the tension that grows each time they force another angle into place. An empath cannot ignore these things. While others admire the finished sculptures, the empath senses the process behind them. The strain of performance reaches them before a word is spoken. The small betrayals people make against their own nature register like faint cracks in stone. The rigid way someone holds their shoulders, the practiced calm in their voice, the hollow enthusiasm they use to mask fatigue, all of it rings in the empath's awareness as clearly as a hammer striking marble. This is why the sculptor's workshop becomes such a difficult place for them. It is not the perfection itself that drains them. It is the cost of that perfection. It is the way people bury their softness to appear strong, the way they hide their vulnerability to seem composed, the way they silence their inner tremors to be admired. Empaths register these buried truths as if they were their own, because the human heart cannot hide its movements from someone who feels in deeper currents. In this workshop, the empath stands as the uncarved stone. They do not want to chisel themselves into a shape that pleases others. They do not feel drawn to a smooth surface or a neat design. Their nature is raw, textured, full of detail that refuses to be flattened. And here lies the tension. A world that worships perfection perceives rawness as unfinished and sensitivity as an inconvenience. It encourages control, not openness. It rewards polish, not presence. The empath, however, moves through life with an inner compass set toward authenticity. They are shaped by what they feel, not by what they are expected to display. And because the world often misunderstands this, they carry two burdens at once. They carry their own truth, and they carry the unspoken truths of others. Energy drains not because they feel too much, but because they feel what others cannot admit. They become aware of the emotional debris scattered across the sculptor's floor, even when everyone else pretends the workshop is clean. Life for an empath often feels like moving through two overlapping worlds. One world is the one everyone can see. In that world, People say the right things, follow the expected rhythms, and maintain a polished presence that fits the standards around them. The other world is quieter, almost hidden, and yet far more potent. That is the world of emotional undercurrents, unspoken tensions, and subtle shifts in energy. Empaths walk inside both worlds at the same time. Imagine arriving at a small gathering after a long day. The conversation flows easily. The laughter is timed just right. Everything looks perfectly ordinary. Yet within moments, something pulls at your attention. A friend's smile feels slightly forced. A pause between two people carries a hint of disagreement left unresolved. A tone of politeness masks a deeper frustration. No one acknowledges any of it, but you sense every detail, as clearly as a draft moving through a room. This awareness does not come from analysis. It happens instantly, like stepping into warm air after being outside in the cold. You absorb the emotional temperature of the environment without trying, and before you even understand what is happening, your body is already responding. Shoulders tighten, breath grows shorter. A weight settles in your chest. Nothing is wrong on the surface, yet something feels heavy. This is the reality that most empaths live with daily. A similar experience unfolds at work. A colleague claims they are fine, yet their voice trembles ever so slightly. Another insists they are not stressed, although their eyes reveal a different story. You listen to the words, but your attention is drawn to the layers beneath them. By the time the meeting ends, others walk away refreshed from the productivity, while you feel drained from carrying emotions no one addressed. Even moments of tenderness can become complicated. When someone you love tries too hard to appear strong, you sense the effort behind it. Their silence speaks louder than their reassurance. Their composure feels thinner than it looks. You want to help them ease that inner tension, yet you also know they must choose when to soften. This awareness creates a quiet burden that few understand. An empath's exhaustion begins long before any conflict appears. It begins the moment they feel what others hide, the moment they enter a room where truth and presentation do not match, and every mismatch becomes another small weight they hold until they can finally rest. There comes a point when an empath begins to wonder why simple environments feel so heavy, why a quiet office leaves them tense, why a smooth conversation drains them more than a difficult one, why a seemingly calm relationship becomes tiring in ways they cannot explain. The reason is not hidden in a single moment. It lives in four deeper forces that shape the perfection-driven world around them. The first force is the pressure to maintain a flawless exterior. Perfection asks people to tighten their expressions, steady their voices, and hold themselves together even when life pulls them apart inside. Most become skilled at this mask. They present certainty, pride, and control. Yet an empath senses the strain beneath that performance. Muscles held too long in one position. Emotions pressed down to stay presentable. The quiet ache of someone pretending to be fine. These unacknowledged burdens move through the empath like echoes, leaving them tired before they speak a single word. The second force is the tension that grows in environments where perfection is the unspoken rule. A room filled with high expectations carries a charge that others overlook. People fear mistakes. They fear being seen as less than capable. They fear disappointing the image they have built. This fear creates a tightness in the atmosphere. It slows the breath and stiffens the spine. Empaths absorb that tightness instinctively. They take in the collective anxiety the way a sensitive instrument responds to changes in air pressure. A world obsessed with seamless performance forgets that pressure accumulates. Empaths feel every bit of it. The third force is the disappearance of vulnerability. Perfection culture treats vulnerability as an inconvenience, something to hide until it has been repaired. This creates environments where honest feelings have no place to land. People speak with confidence even when they doubt themselves. They attempt optimism when they are quietly collapsing inside. Empaths cannot form real connections in these spaces. Connection needs warmth, softness, and small truths spoken gently. When none of that is allowed, the empath feels as though they are standing in a room without air. Their nature relies on emotional oxygen, and perfection seals every window. The fourth force is the subtle punishment of sensitivity. Society praises strength that looks firm, not strength that feels deeply. Sensitivity is often misunderstood as fragility, even when it carries profound intelligence. Empaths read emotional nuance the way some read languages, yet this gift becomes a burden in places that prefer simple answers, quick fixes, and controlled emotions. The empath's depth unsettles systems built on efficiency rather than sincerity. So they learn to hold their perception quietly, hoping not to overwhelm others, yet feeling overwhelmed themselves by the effort to stay small. These forces combine into an invisible architecture that surrounds the empath each day. They do not fight one single challenge. They move through landscapes, shaped by pressure, silence, and pretense. Others walk across these landscapes without noticing the terrain. Empaths feel every contour beneath their feet. They feel every shift in the ground. Exhaustion, for an empath, is not a mysterious condition. It is the natural response of a heart that remains open in environments that reward being closed. It is the fatigue of sensing life where others display perfection. It is the weight of truth carried quietly through spaces that prefer polish over presence. There is a moment, often quiet and often unexpected, when an empath realizes that their exhaustion has never been a personal flaw. It has never been proof that they are too soft for the world or too easily affected by life. The truth reveals itself in a gentler way. Their exhaustion comes from living as a finely tuned instrument in a world asking everyone to behave like solid drums. The contrast between these two natures explains everything. A drum responds only when struck with force. Its sound is clear, simple, and predictable. Many people move through life in this way. They react to obvious events, respond to visible pressure, and feel only what is loud enough to break through their defenses. This is not wrong. It is simply a way of being. An empath lives as something entirely different. Their inner world resembles a stringed instrument, sensitive to the slightest change in atmosphere. A shift in tone, a small hesitation between words, a subtle disappointment carried in someone's silence, all of it vibrates through them the way a soft breeze moves across the strings of a harp. This responsiveness is not a weakness. It is part of an ancient design. It allows them to perceive complexity that others cannot sense. It allows them to understand emotions still forming, truths still hidden, and needs others have not yet spoken. But here lies the misunderstanding that shapes an empath's fatigue. The world often demands the simplicity of drums, not the depth of strings. It praises steadiness over sensitivity, clarity over nuance, performance over presence. When an empath tries to match that expectation, their nature becomes strained. Their strings are tightened beyond comfort. Their resonance becomes muted. They lose the gentle flexibility that protects them. And in losing that flexibility, they begin to tire. The deeper truth is that empaths are not meant to harden themselves to survive. They are meant to return to the natural movement of their own inner instrument. Strings produce beauty because they are allowed to vibrate. They are not forced to stay stiff, nor required to stay silent. When an empath suppresses their emotional resonance to appear composed, they create internal tension no one else can see. When they hide their insight to seem uncomplicated, the dissonance grows larger. When they push away their sensitivity to avoid overwhelming others, they begin to overwhelm themselves. The world worships perfection because it fears the unknown. A polished surface gives the illusion of safety. A practiced expression suggests control. Yet empaths are drawn to the unpolished places. They sense the life beneath the surface. They understand that truth rarely appears flawless. And this understanding is not a burden, it is their gift. The reframing begins when the empath recognizes that their role is not to become a drum. Their role is to remember the value of their own resonance. A world that worships perfection needs people who remember how to feel. It needs those who can sense when something real is missing. It needs those who hear the quiet notes beneath the noise. Exhaustion lifts when the empath stops resisting their nature. Energy returns when they stop tightening their inner strings to match the rigid rhythms of others. Strength emerges when they allow themselves to be what they were made to be. The truth hidden beneath all the tiredness is simple. An empath is not failing in a perfection-driven world. They are revealing what that world has forgotten. Understanding the nature of empathic exhaustion is only the first step. The next step is learning how to live in a perfection-driven world without losing the gentle resonance that makes an empath who they are. This doesn't require dramatic change. It begins with small moments of awareness, moments that soften the tension that has been held for too long. One simple practice is to pause at the beginning of the day and notice how your body feels before the world touches you. Sit for a moment with your hand resting lightly on your chest. Feel the rhythm underneath your palm. Allow yourself to sense what belongs to you rather than what you have absorbed from others. This helps reset the boundary between your emotional landscape and the landscapes you walk through. Another helpful practice is to name the places where you tighten yourself. You might soften your tone to keep the peace. You might hold your breath during conversations that feel too polished. You might shrink your presence to avoid overwhelming someone who prefers straightforward emotions. Acknowledging these moments allows you to release the tension they create. A quiet recognition is sometimes enough to change how energy moves through you. There is also value in treating your sensitivity the way a musician treats a finely tuned instrument. Instruments need rest between performances. They need a silent room after being played too long. They need space to resonate without pressure. Empaths need the same. This might mean stepping outside for a few breaths after an intense interaction. It might mean sitting alone for a moment before entering another crowded space. It might mean ending a conversation gently when you feel your inner strings pulling too tight. A small daily reflection can also help. At the end of the day, write one sentence answering a single question. What emotion did I carry today that did not belong to me? The act of placing those emotions on paper releases them from your inner world. It separates your truth from the echoes you absorbed unconsciously. These practices do not make you harder or less affected. They help you stay aligned with your true nature while living among people who are still sculpting themselves into shapes they believe they must hold. You do not need to join them in that shaping. You only need to remember the movement of your own resonance. As the day settles and the noise of the world begins to fade, something becomes clearer. The perfection-driven world may still be shaping itself, carving away every rough edge, polishing every surface, and demanding that everyone fit into its preferred design. Yet there is a quiet truth standing just outside that workshop. It is the presence of those who refuse to be shaped into something they are not. Picture a block of untouched stone resting at the edge of the sculptor's yard. It has not been carved, smoothed, or refined. It simply exists in its natural form. The sun warms its surface, the wind moves across it, rain leaves soft marks that add to its story. Nothing about it is flawless, yet its presence is complete. It carries the dignity of something that has never betrayed itself. This block of stone resembles the empath who finally stops trying to fit the world's expectations. They stand without forcing their edges into someone else's idea of beauty. They let their texture remain visible. They let their depth remain intact. The world may not always understand this choice, yet the integrity of that choice creates a quiet radiance around them. A moment arrives when the empath notices something subtle. Their exhaustion does not come from feeling deeply. It comes from resisting the truth of that depth. It comes from trying to hide what was never meant to be concealed. Sensitivity becomes heavy only when it is denied. Once allowed to breathe, it becomes a source of clarity rather than fatigue. From this place, the world begins to look different. The polished figures inside the workshop are still admirable, but they no longer set the standard. The empath sees that life is not meant to be a perfect sculpture. It is meant to be lived with all its texture, all its complexity, and all its honest imperfections. Strength does not come from hardening. It comes from allowing what is soft to stay soft. It comes from standing as you are, even when the world prefers a different shape. And in that quiet authenticity, something luminous appears, something that perfection can never create. It is the light of being fully human. If these reflections have stirred something familiar in you, let that recognition stay with you for a moment. There is no rush to turn it into action or insight. Sometimes the most meaningful shift is simply acknowledging what has been true for a long time. Sensitivity has always been a form of understanding. Exhaustion has always been a signal, not a flaw. And the tenderness you carry is not a burden, it is a guide. As you move through the rest of your day, notice the places where you begin to tighten yourself again. Notice when you start shaping your presence to match someone else's expectations. Notice when you silence an instinct or soften a truth to keep the peace. Each moment of noticing is a return to yourself. Each return is a reminder that you do not need to become a perfect sculpture to belong in this world. If you found clarity in these words, stay close for the next reflection. There is always more to uncover, more to understand, and more to remember about the way your heart works. You are not alone in this experience, even if the world rarely speaks in the language you understand. There are others learning how to live gently in a place that moves too fast. Carry this awareness with you for now. Let it settle in its own way. And when you feel ready, come back for another moment of quiet, another moment of truth. Another step towards seeing that your sensitivity is not something to endure, but something that shows you how to live with honesty and depth.